Well, this morning we're in James chapter 1 and verse number 26 and verse 27. James chapter 1, verse 26, verse 27. And these are important verses because it's oftentimes we overlook the importance of what James is saying. In verse number 26, if any man seem, that is, he fancies or supposes himself to be religious, but he doesn't bridle his tongue. And of course, you well know that you put a bridle on a horse to control it. And so, what James is saying in the first place, if you do not control your tongue, and of course, a lot of folks don't, and they sink into slander and gossip and just go down that path. And James is warning us here that if a man does not control or restrain his tongue, that is what he says, he deceiveth himself. And that's easy to do, isn't it? A man that doesn't control himself and he thinks himself to be something and he's not, because he's deceived himself and is really who he is. And so what James goes on to say then, and this is a pretty profound statement, and that is that his religion is vain. And of course, the word vain means of no value. It's useless. If something's vain, it's just of no good at all. And that's a rather striking statement because especially people out on the street would probably never think that. And so James is saying, now, if you don't control your tongue and you let your tongue run with all kind of things, talking evil and slandering and libel and misrepresenting, all of that. James just says, you're not who you think you are. That's what he means when he says, supposes himself to be religious, and he deceiveth himself. But James goes on to say something else here, very, very important. Pure religion, and that's what we want, isn't it? We want the real thing. We want true religion. And so what James is saying there is that genuine religion is and undefiled before God, and that's where it has to be. It doesn't matter what it looks like to other people, what religion does, but what really matters is God's assessment of our relationship with Him. And so he goes on to say then that this man, before God and the Father, is to visit the fatherless. So first of all, real religion is to look into, the word visit doesn't mean just to drop by, but if there's a person in need, it sort of reminds us of the story of the Good Samaritan. But, the one who is doing the real thing before God. That's what I'm trying to say it for real religion, because the word religion just throws us in all kinds of directions. But what he's saying is that real religion and before the Father is to visit the widows or the fatherless and the widows. Those are people that are destitute. They're deprived of the father who would provide for the family, and of course, the widow is deprived of her husband, and so in those days they didn't have, some system to set up, at least anything like we got. And therefore, he's saying here that we're to look into, in a real helpful way, the fatherless and the widow in their affliction, and that means in their distress. When they're in trouble and they have great need, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. So those are challenging statements, aren't they? That's what we want, isn't it? Real religion that God approves, and that's why he says before the Father. And the two things he mentions here is, hey, help those that are in need and keep yourself untainted from the world. Challenging thoughts. See you next week.